Hey folks, I've been having a lot of trouble getting whole wheat grain lately, as I'm sure a lot of you have as well. And in an act of desperation the other week, I bought some plain flour from the supermarket because my grain stock was getting low and I really want to make my whole wheat breads, but it just wasn't going to last and I couldn't find any more online. So I bought some plain flour and I've been mixing it with my whole grain flour, which I've been milling at home, just to make my grains last a bit longer. Anyway, these 50% loaves have been turning out really, really well. And in my usual style, I'm just doing an easy method, so I thought it was worthwhile sharing with you all today. I hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
So I start off this recipe in the morning and I just start by mixing my flours. I've got 250 grams of plain flour, that's about 1 3/4 of a cup, and I've got 250 grams of whole wheat flour, which is just under 2 metric cups. Then I add my salt. I just add my salt straight to the flour. I'm using about 8 grams. You could use a bit more if you wanted to. That's about 1.5 metric teaspoons. Then I just mix the salt into the flours really thoroughly. This is important because you're not going to do a lot of kneading or mixing of this dough. So mix that salt in really well and then make a well in the centre of the flour. That just makes it easier to mix in the water and the starter. So I'm using a scale for this, but I give the volume measurements as well. So I use 416 grams of water, that's about 1 2/3 of a metric cup, and it's an 85% hydration recipe. Then I add my starter. This is just like 3-day-old starter from the fridge. I'm using 120 grams of whole wheat sourdough starter, which is about half a cup. As long as your starter's been fed in the last few days and you've kept it in the fridge, it will be strong enough to make a loaf of bread like this. So just loosen up the starter in the water, mix that around, and then just slowly incorporate more flour into the mix, and mix quite vigorously as you do this because you really want that starter to be really well broken up and incorporated into your flour. This is especially important if you're using a bread flour or an all-purpose flour starter. It will be more glutinous and harder to break up, so you'll have to mix it really well. If you're using a whole wheat flour starter like I am, it'll break up a bit easier. Then I just get my trusty spatula and I just kind of fold the dough around a little bit just to pick up any dry bits of flour from the bottom and the sides. And that's it. That's all the mixing there is. So you cover your dough, just use a plate if you've got no fancy cover like I do. Plate is fine. And then before I do anything else, I feed my starter. I feed it with 65 grams each of flour and water. That's about half a cup of flour and 1/3 of a cup of water. So I do this just after I've mixed my bread, and then I let my starter kind of ferment during the day alongside the bread, and then I'll put it back in the fridge for next time. So mix your starter really vigorously as well. You want to make sure that you get the little bit of starter that was left in the bottom of the jar. You want to make sure that gets really well mixed in. Then, you know, this step's optional, but I like to scrape down the sides of my starter jar as well. It just keeps everything nice and clean and prevents any mold growth or anything like that on the sides of your jar. So there's my starter done. So here's my bread again. I'm just going to set the timer now for 30 minutes. So I'm going to do stretch and folds on this dough throughout the day, every 30 minutes. This is the first fold. I just wet my hand first and just kind of pick up the dough and fold it in on itself. You can see it's really sort of sloppy, wet dough at this point. If you want, you can use less water than I did. I just have a bit of a habit of using lots of water in my doughs, but please feel free to use less water than I did. So yeah, it slowly comes together. You'll see throughout the day. Just give it a few folds. It's really sticky at this point. You're just wanting to slowly start to bring it together. And cover it up and leave it for another half an hour. You don't have to fold this every half an hour either. Just, do it a few times throughout the day and you'll still get a really good loaf of bread. This is the second fold. Just doing the same thing again. You can see already that the texture is smoother and the dough is sort of gaining a bit more strength and coming together a bit. Sometimes I make a bread like this and I might only do a couple of folds throughout the bulk ferment. It's really up to you. I'm just trying to get the ideal structure within my skill level in this dough, so I did lots of folds, but you don't have to do as many as this. This is the fourth fold. You can see the dough's starting to get, a lot more sort of silky and smooth. And when you're folding, just fold until you feel the dough resist. If you really don't want to tear the dough, you just want to get, just pull it up and stretch it and pull it down. But once you start to feel it resist and it's starting to tear, stop. Don't go any further than you need to. This is 1:30 p.m. now. This is a sixth fold. You can see that this dough is starting to get some really good air in it. It's starting to really ferment and get a bit gassy. If you wanted to do an overnight final proof, you could shape it at this point, but I am doing this all in one day, so I keep going. Oh, bit of background noise there. Sorry about the lawnmower too. So that's the seventh fold, I think, at 2:30. The dough is definitely gassy, and my starter's ready to go back in the fridge now. 3:30 p.m. Yep, that dough is ready to shape. I probably could have shaped it at the last fold, but I left it a bit longer. As I said, if you're going to bake it all in the one day, then you can stretch out that bulk ferment a little bit. But if you want to put your bread in the fridge and do the final proof in the fridge, then shorten up that bulk ferment a little bit. Definitely don't let it go this far. Oh, it's very slack and well fermented dough. This is the first shaping, so I just kind of fold it in on itself, and you just want to pull a little bit of tension into it, but be very careful here. You don't want to tear this dough. It's quite delicate. So just give it some tension and cover it up again, and then leave it for probably about 15-20 minutes or so for the final shaping, just so that it can relax a little bit, and then you firm it up again in the final shaping. So I'm just using an old tea towel, cloth tea towel with some brown rice flour on it. That's going to be my basket liner. This is just a funny plastic basket that I got from a cheapie shop. I really like the shape of these long loaves, so I use it quite a lot. And you can see I don't use any flour either. I just use a little bit of water when I'm shaping my doughs and handling my doughs. So to shape, you just pretty much do the same thing. I'm just doing like a letter fold. Just fold it in on itself, press down those seams gently, and then I just kind of roll it up, but being very gentle. Kind of want to roll it up and add some tension. Press those seams a little bit, but really, really gentle. You do not want to tear that outer surface of the dough. You want to keep that intact. And pop it in your basket or whatever you're using. You could use the parchment paper. You can use all sorts of things to proof your bread in. And I'll just do a last minute little stitching here. I did tear the dough a little bit. You're probably best to let it rest for 5 minutes before you do this, but I did it straight away. You can see I've got a little bit of tearing there, but that's alright. You're just kind of wanting to add a little bit more tension in the dough. I'm not an expert in this. I just kind of do it the best way that I can, and I'm really happy with the results. I don't think, we don't all have to be great bakers to make a pretty decent loaf of bread. So once that's done, put a little bit more flour on the top, fold it up and cover it just with a layered over tea towel. So the final proof for this dough is 50 minutes, but the proofing time will depend on your dough. Sometimes it will be longer and other times shorter. The main factors are the overall level of fermentation of your dough and the ambient temperature. When you're about 20 minutes out from baking your bread, preheat your oven and a baking pot, if you're using one, to 220 degrees Celsius for at least 20 minutes before you bake. My dough is ready to bake now. it passes the jiggle test. Just do a little bit of a jiggle. That's just one way I kind of look out to see if my dough is proofed. But it's visibly larger as well. You know that it's ready to bake when it's gained some size and it's looking a bit wobbly. I just use my little razor blade here. I'm just doing very shallow scores on this bread. I don't want it to spread out too much. It is probably a bit overproofed, so I'm just being very cautious on the scoring. Nice and shallow cuts. Cover it up. I've got my preheated roaster there, and I bake this loaf for 1 hour at 220 Celsius or 428 Fahrenheit. I didn't uncover the bread at all during the bake because that black roaster that I use, it gives this loaf such a good crust even without uncovering it. And here's the final bread. It's beautiful and crusty. I just love the crispiness of that crust. It's so delicious. It's got a lovely golden colour as well. And it smells divine. It's just beautiful. I'm really, really pleased with that.
Hey folks, well here's the bread. It's the next day. I'm so happy with this loaf. It turned out just beautiful. It's still pretty crusty because we're having pretty dry weather here at the moment, so that does tend to help the crust last quite long. It was a really crispy, beautiful crust last night, but I wanted to save it for the morning and film it out here. We've been having such gorgeous autumn weather here in Brisbane. So without further ado, let's cut it. Well, there it is. I'm really happy with this loaf. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a fairly straightforward method to make a 50% whole wheat sourdough loaf. There's no autolyse, there's nothing really fancy, just a few stretch and folds and trying to get the fermentation and the proofing just right. That's the real trick. It could have been shaped maybe a little bit better. I'm not an expert baker. I'm not expert in shaping by any means, so you know, I just kind of throw them together the best that I can, but I got pretty good results, so I hope it inspires you to try out the recipe. Please let me know if you've got any questions or comments as usual, and thanks everyone. See you in the next video. Bye.